Hi, I'm Alastair Ping. I'm a adjunct professor at QUT Graduate School of Business. My area of speciality is ethics, well, applied ethics, in particular, why good people do bad things. And this is a short presentation on maintaining integrity and well-being in a VUCA environment. So just let me start off. I just want to just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where QUT stands, and also where I am in the Sunshine Coast, which is the Gubbi Gubbi people, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. Okay, so if you're like me, you've probably been pretty challenged by some of the things that have happened in the world in the last couple of years. For me personally, it was really middle of last year, so middle of 2021, when we'd been dealing with COVID for around about a year. And suddenly we realised that it wasn't going to go away, it was going to go on for a little bit longer. And so personally, I found struggling with depression, anxiety about the future, etc. Dealing with teenage children that were suffering from the same sort of angst. And then I found that a lot of the clients that I was working with, I do quite a lot of coaching, leadership coaching with senior executives at QUT. And I was finding that quite a lot of the senior execs were struggling with the same sort of thing. So I looked at the interdisciplinary theory and put together this presentation, and also a program for creating a self-mastery system. Obviously, the challenge after that was how to actually communicate it in as simple and succinct as way as possible. And so what I've done in this presentation is I really followed Kolb's experiential learning model, which you can see there on the screen in front of you. So basically what this does, so first of all, note that it's a circle, and we'll come back to the idea of working in circles later on the presentation. But essentially what you do with Kolb's experiential learning model is you immerse yourself in the task. So, okay, let's have a look at how do you maintain integrity and well-being in a VUCA environment. We're effectively going to reflect on it, the issues that we've had, look at some of the theory around it. So we're going to conceptualize it, what actually makes sense, and then look at, rightio, what do you actually have to do now? So first of all, let's just start off. So just be clear on what the issue is. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So VUCA is a term that was coined by the US military. And of course, the environment that we're operating in the moment is very much aligned to those concepts. So how can we balance our competing priorities, maintain integrity and well-being in such an environment? And I draw your attention to the quote there by Marianne Williamson. So you must master a new way to think before you can master a new way to be. All right, so you can master a new way to think before you can master a new way to be. So what does the latest interdisciplinary research in ethics, complexity, intentional change, systems thinking, and well-being tell us? And what are these thinking shifts we need to make? So let's just start by defining terms. So we're on the same page here. So integrity, what are we talking about with integrity? So we're talking about the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. The state of being whole and undivided, and put it simply, walking your talk and alignment of values in action. And Martin Luther King, good quote there from Martin Luther King, the ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of challenge and controversy. And I'm sure you would all agree that over the last couple of years, with the challenges that have been happening in the world, we've seen not only the bad aspects of human nature, but also the very good aspects of human nature. And then well-being. So well-being, the state of being comfortable, healthy or happy. And I would say they're holistic. So you can see the little model on the right-hand side there. So 5 areas of well-being, so mental, emotional, material, spiritual, and physical. And of course, VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. All right, let's get going. So volatility. So what is the effect of volatility? So volatility really is emotional volatility. So it affects our well-being. And the useful theory to look at there is neurocognitive science. And what neurocognitive science tells us is that we're basically making decisions using 2 different processes. So first one, systems 1 thinking, is a subconscious reflective pattern matching cycle. So that's thinking fast. And if you think of Daniel Kahneman's work, thinking fast, thinking slow. So obviously this relates to thinking fast. And this is like hot emotions. So decisions that we're making like very, very quickly. And then the second cycle is higher order reasoning. So this is thinking slow. This is cold emotion. So this is causing us to actually stop, pause, assess all the information available to us and make a conscious decision. Now, the majority of the time we're using the reflexive cycle and engaging in pattern matching because it uses less energy, right? So the estimates are that higher order conscious reasoning uses sometimes something like 4 times as much energy as subconscious pattern matching. So from a survival perspective, we're trying to save energy. So we default into subconscious pattern matching. Now, the problem is that the way we're hardwired means, as it says there on the slide, that we will continue to look for a simple solution. So if it's worked before, we're going to assume that it's going to work again, and we're going to default into that. Now, most of us think that we're operating most of the time using higher order conscious reasoning, but the reality is most of the time you're just pattern matching against the past. So you're going through like that sort of Groundhog Day type scenario. Now, the problem with this is that we also suffer from confirmation bias. So confirmation bias means that once we've actually made a decision, we're going to dismiss any evidence that questions its validity, and we're going to focus on all the evidence that supports the decision we've made is already right, even if the decision we've made is to our detriment. So we want to be right more than we want to be objective. And in our brains, we have a self-regulatory function that allows us to regulate between hot and cold emotions, so fast and slow thinking. So the effect of volatility is it diminishes our capacity to self-regulate between hot and cold emotions, okay? So the implications of that are twofold. So with integrity, it basically means that we're going to pattern match against past experience for expediency. So you might find that you're making decisions very, very quickly, and you're justifying why those decisions need to be made because of expediency. So we're under pressure, we've got to do it quick. And the problem there, of course, is that you don't get an opportunity to assess all the information. You're making those decisions, as I said, very quickly, and your brain does not want to go and revisit them. With regard to well-being, there's significant implications there for overwhelm, stress, and burnout. And so therefore, the thinking shift that is required in this is to consciously embed pauses. So for those of you who've seen my work before, so a lot of the work that you need to do is to be able to shift from reactive type thinking to acting more proactively and intentionally. So what that means by embedding pauses is, for example, before you go into a meeting, instead of rushing from one meeting to another, stop, breathe, take a little moment to like ground yourself out. Use 4-fold breathing or 4-7-8 breathing, and you can Google that as well, or contact me if you want some more details. And then once you're actually grounded out, then think about, what is my intention going into this meeting? Okay, so what I'm talking about there is habit chunking. So instead of just mindlessly going through the day and bouncing from one situation to another, actually embed processes that cause you to stop, ground yourself out, think about what is my intention going to this meeting, and be more conscious about what you're actually doing. The second thinking shift to embed is to shift from to-do list to time blocking. So what that means is that if we're focused on to-do lists, we're very much focused on what we need to do, okay? But if we're in doing mode, then if you think about Stephen Covey's 7 habits, the 4 quadrants, so what we miss, what we're focusing on is things that are urgent but not necessarily important. So again, it drives this reactive cycle. And in time blocking, what you need to acknowledge is that there are particular things that you need to do for your well-being. So things like physical exercise, spiritual practices, emotionally connect with the ones we love, etc., etc. And in time blocking, what you do is you recognize the importance of that, and you block out pieces of time to be able to put that into your schedule and basically make that non-negotiable. Okay, let's have a look at the second one. So uncertainty. So what uncertainty affects is our ability, obviously, to predict the future. And the implications of that are for ethical decision-making. So with ethical decision-making, often we think we know what will happen next. And if you look at this model here, so this is Jones's moral intensity model, which you can see dates back to 1991. And I would suggest to you that this is the model that the majority of research over the last sort of 30 odd years with regard to ethical decision-making is focused on. So you can see this model here. So first of all, you recognize the moral issue. Two, you make a moral judgment using some form of normative ethical thinking. So it could be utilitarian thinking, universalist, etc., etc. You establish moral intent, and then you engage in moral behaviour. And this little square at the top there, moral intensity, what that says is that you're going to pay more attention to a very big issue than a small issue. So you're going to pay more attention to like a $5 million fraud than to maybe stealing the office stationery. Now, the problem with this is that I would suggest to you that most of us in this day and age default into utilitarian type thinking. So utilitarian type thinking is the question where you're asking, okay, what's good outcome here? And what's the greatest good to the greatest number and least harm to least number? So it's very rational, logical thinking. But the problem is that uncertainty, as I pointed out to you, diminishes our capacity to predict the future. So it diminishes our capacity to objectively and accurately make those assessments that we need to make to adopt utilitarian type thinking. So you can see there the implications. So with regard to integrity, utilitarian thinking is compromised. And again, we've seen many, many instances over the last 2 years where various people have said, okay, this is the answer because this is what's going to happen. And then a little bit of time passes on and suddenly everything changes, right? So all the utilitarian thinking goes out the window. It also has pretty significant implications for our well-being because unpredicted outcomes create more stress, overwhelm, and burnout. So again, when you're thinking before, maybe you're thinking before you could plan ahead, 6 months, 9 months to a holiday you're going to have or something like that. And uncertainty basically means that we can't predict accurately forwards. And again, you have large amounts of stress. So what's the thinking shift? Okay, so you need to shift from linear type thinking, so straight line type thinking, where we think we know what's going to happen next, to circular type thinking. So you start thinking about, okay, how do I actually go around in a circle here? And the critical shift also from an ethics perspective is to shift from outcome-based thinking to intentional thinking. And I'll just give you a little example there, or explanation, I suppose, of what that means. So you can see here on the left, so utilitarian thinking, you're asking what outcomes will be created by different actions, how will they affect people, and which action will create the greatest good and the least harm. So in the past, present, future model, again, if you're familiar with my work, you'll be aware of this is an existential model. So existentially, the key relationship is between being and time, and you can divide existence into these three realms, so past, present, future. So if we're adopting utilitarian thinking, so in the present moment, you're faced with a problem, the first thing you do is you go back to the past, okay? So, and you're making some analysis based on past experience, and then you think you know what's going to happen in the future, so you've got predicted outcomes, right? And you act in that way. And in this model, time is going forwards. And like I said, the accuracy of it is very much related to the accuracy of your future predictions. With moral intention theory, so when we're shifting to working intentionally, the key questions are, what are we trying to create together? What actions are aligned to that? And are we justifying our actions based on our values? Okay, so with utilitarian type thinking, so if standing in the present moment when you face with a problem, the first thing you want to do is go over to the future and ask those questions, what are we trying to create together, right? And then you come back this way, what actions are aligned to that intention? And note that that's moral intent. So moral intent is bounded by our aspirational values. And then after you take actions, we want to check whether or not the justifications are actually based on the value. So you can see the time is going the other way around. And this is very much focused on, as I said, the key question of what are we trying to create together? And, what does the ideal look like, or what does good actually look like? So quite a big shift in the way that we think. And again, requires you to stop, pause, and actually embed that style of thinking rather than mindlessly going forward and defaulting into what we've always done. Okay, so the third one is complexity. So complexity, and it's worthwhile looking at complexity theory. So the key impact of complexity theory is that the cause and effect relationship breaks down. So this little model here that we're looking at, so this is Snowden and Boone from 2007. And you can see that what Snowden and Boone say is that before you do anything of a strategic nature, you should first identify the nature of the environment that you're operating in. And so if you're on the right-hand side of this graphic here, so if you're in either a complicated or a simple environment, then the cause and effect relationship is very stable. So you do A, you get B, A, B, A, B, very stable, okay? Now, if that's the case, if you're in a simple or a complicated environment, then basically you look around for good practice or best practice, and then you retrofit it. The problem is, if you're on the left-hand side of this graphic here, so if you're in a complex or a chaotic environment, then the cause and effect relationship breaks down. So you do A, maybe sometimes you get B, but also you might get Z, Y, F, G, whatever, okay? And in that environment, of course, you go, far out, what am I supposed to do here? The old solutions that you had aren't going to work. And so what Snowden and Boone say is that if you're in a complex environment, what you should do is you should probe. So you probe the system, right? And so the key skill here, if you like, or the superpower, if you like, is really curiosity. So you probe the system. So I wonder what would happen if I did this. So you probe the system, I wonder what would happen if you did this, and then you sense, is anything shifting? And what you're looking for is emergent practice. And as you see something emerging that is aligned to what you want, then you respond by embedding it, okay? So the shift, let's go through it. So the effect. So we can't clearly define the cause and effect relationship. The implications. So utilitarian thinking is compromised because we can't comprehend all the possible outcomes. So see how, again, it's compromising our default mode, if you like, with utilitarian. Again, it has implications for well-being, so more stress, overwhelm, burnout. And the thinking shift required. So you need to shift from solutions to experiments, okay? So remember, with solutions, what you're doing is straight away you're looking backwards. And you're doing all the analysis, and you're going, okay, this is the answer, project it forwards, right? But in complexity, you can't understand the cause and effect relationship, so you can't do that. So if you're trying to do that, you're basically just going to be more and more frustrated. So what you do instead is flip around the other way. Okay, what are we trying to create? What would good actually look like? What experiment could we run that might shift the needle, right? And then you prod the system by running the experiment. And again, what you're looking for is emergent practice. So is anything good occurring which is aligned to what I'm trying to create? And then, as it said there, so what you want to embed is circular feedback loops. So you start here, you have my intention is to create whatever. I run an experiment, I circle back around, then you go, okay, did that experiment work? Yes or no? If it worked, you embed it. If it didn't work, you go, that didn't work. What else can I try? See how that's a different way of thinking? The fourth area, ambiguity, and it's worthwhile the interdisciplinary theory to look at here is systems thinking. So what systems thinking says is that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So see how on the left-hand side there you're looking at the parts, right-hand side, the interconnected nature of a system. And the key point there is that we can't comprehend the whole. Right? We can't comprehend the whole. So what we need to explore is the relationships in the system to be able to understand the system. And the thinking shift's required here. So again, see how this is crossing over with some of the things that we've already covered, but let's just go through them. So the first one is curiosity. So you need to release certainty. So now rational logical thinking is going to drive you down the path of doing more analysis. I need more information. How do I do that? And what you're looking for, as I said, is certainty. So you can pull it apart, you can come up with a solution, project it forwards. As I've already pointed out to you, that's not going to work in a complex VUCA environment. All right, so you need to let go of certainty and you need to be curious. So we need to be curious, so we're actually digging into the system. I wonder what would happen. I wonder what the relationship is here. I wonder what was going to happen now. The second one is disconnection to interconnectedness. All right, so if you have the idea of separation, so whether that be us and them, anything like that, silos, anything like that is not going to work. What you need to look at is the interconnected nature of reality and interconnected nature of, I would say, humanity. So it's really a shift in mindset. The third one is to shift from parts to wholes. So stop looking at the parts and start looking at the whole system. Linear to circular, so we've already talked about that. So feedback loops shape the future. Right, so we want to go round and round and round. Analysis to synthesis. Okay, so we've already talked about analysis, and a good analogy here is, are you a bicycle or a frog? Also, do you see the world as a bicycle or a frog? So if you see the world as a bicycle, you can pull it all apart into its bits, put it all back together, it still works. Okay. If you see the world as a frog, you can pull it all apart, try and put it together, it's not going to work. Okay. So the total is greater than the sum of the parts. So there's something in the system that's creating more than what you can actually see. Okay. Silos to emergence. So larger things emerge from smaller parts. Right. So acknowledging that small things can create these big things. Isolation to relationships. So again, exploring relationships to understand the system. And then solutions to experimentation and play. So similar to what we were talking about before. Okay. Now, as well as there being implications for the VUCA environment, there are, of course, some system-wide challenges that we've been facing and continue to face. And just to name a few of them, obviously the global pandemic, climate change, conflict between sovereign nations or sovereign states, cyberbullying, treatment of women in society. Okay, now all of these challenges, as I said, they're systems-wide challenges. Okay, so they're not isolated, and all of these challenges don't just affect us individually or don't just affect one part of the world. They affect all of humanity. Right, so there's some really significant thinking shifts that are required, and you can see there the quote from Virgil. I think it's behind the picture of me, but the quote there is, "The only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation." Okay, and I would suggest to you, excuse me, I would suggest to you that we are in a time of massive paradigm shift, right? Massive paradigm shift. So shifting from a time when social structures and organizations are basically built on the principles of competitiveness, and shifting to creating social structures that are based on the principles of collaboration. All right, so some of the shifts there. So let's just go through it. So competition is win-lose, us and them. Win-lose / us, them, all right? Collaboration theory, shift to what are we trying to create together? Okay, so what are we trying to create together? Shift on competition, I'm right, you're wrong. What's in it for me, right? So very much personal based. How can I get what I want? And the summary there is it's a battle. Collaboration theory, as I said, is very much focused on what are we trying to create together. It relies on cooperation, courage to speak truth, taking turns, honesty and humility, and the willingness to admit failure, right? The willingness to admit failure. So if you're stuck in your fixed position and you refuse to say, far out, I was wrong, you're going down the wrong path, right? Remember, we're in this together. We're relying on everybody else to actually, work together And what we're looking for is things like psychological safety, well-being, etc. Obviously, addressing climate change, etc., etc., etc. We're going to make mistakes along the way. So the critical thing here, as I said, is to act intentionally. Right? Intentionally. What are we trying to create together? Resist the temptation to go back into far out, who's right, who's wrong, who's to blame, etc. Regurgitate all the crap from the past. Right? And think instead, keep orientating towards the future, orientating towards the future. What are we trying to create together? What are the values that we want to guide our society? How can we work together for mutual benefit and cooperation? How do we create abundance, peace in the world? Okay, and it's a learning challenge. So therefore, if we have challenges or we make mistakes, we need to be willing to go, sorry, mistake, reset, but keep striving to create what we want to create in the world. So just a summary. So you can see the quote there, Chinese proverb. So crisis is only opportunity riding on a high wind. And as I said to you, I think at the moment the world is facing some pretty significant crises, but also gives us the opportunity to change things. So here's the as is on the left-hand side. So mindless pattern matching, set and forget type thinking, 2D orientation, linear thinking, focus on outcomes, solutions, focusing on the parts, looking at things in isolation and competition. And the 2B, where do we need to shift to? Mindfulness. Mindfulness, mindfulness, mindfulness. Stop, embed some of these mindful things. Think about, for example, what sort of world you want to create for the kids. Intentional action. What are we trying to create together? What would good actually look like? Time blocking and well-being. So don't be afraid to block out time for the important things in life. Whether, again, that be physical well-being, spiritual practices, emotional well-being, spending time with the ones we love, etc. Circular thinking. So shift from linear thinking to circular thinking. Intentions. So shift from outcomes to intentions. So what are we trying to create? Shift from solutions to experiments. I wonder what would happen if we did this. Right? Stop looking at the parts and start looking at the whole. Explore relationships. And finally, and again, collaboration. We need to work collaboratively. We need to work together. So how do you maintain integrity and well-being in a VUCA environment? So this is putting it all together. So here's 8 questions here. And again, if you want to know more about this, I'll give you the links in a minute, but I've uploaded some videos on this as well to YouTube channel. So here we go. So 1, so what's your big picture vision? Okay, so what's your intention? So if you're going to lead a good life, what does it look like? And then there's a whole lot of different ways of looking at this. You know, if you can think about it, what do I want somebody to say in my eulogy? What do I want to reflect on my deathbed, etc., etc. What are the key values that guide you, right? And again, worthwhile doing reflective practice to tune into that. What is your weekly routine regarding physical, mental, emotional, material, and spiritual? So that's the time blocking. What are the things that you need to have in your life, right? So that you can self-actualize and you can be in a good space yourself. So block out that time. What does your reflective practice look like? So daily, weekly, and monthly. So these are the circular feedback loops, right? And I would say, like I said, embed daily. What's daily practice, right? And then weekly, have a weekly review. And then monthly, have a bigger one on the outside. So see how it's a very different way of thinking about it. 5, what's your happiness plan? What do you do to get into flow, right? So don't just take this for granted. And you can look at, there's lots of tools on this. You can look at the Authentic Happiness website, Martin Seligman, which is positive psychology. You can look at all the research that's been done into flow and how you get into flow states, right? But then again, deliberately plan to do that and again, block out that time. 6, who's in your circle? So who are you collaborating with? Can't work as individuals anymore. Like we need to really work with each other. So again, take some time out, really think about that. What's your current experiment? So what are you playing with now? So what are you playing with now? I wonder what would happen if I did this, right? Run experiments so we can go around and around. 8, what's your reset process if you're off track, right? So how do you, A, recognize that you are off track and B, pivot back onto being on track? Okay, so again, explicitly identify what your research process is. And then finally, just to wrap up here, so here's a quote by a guy called Albert Einstein, who apparently had a few ideas about things. So the problems that exist in the world today cannot be solved by the level of thinking that created them. Okay, let's do it again. So the problems that exist in the world today cannot be solved by the level of thinking that created them. Time for some new thinking, people. Okay. And I'm sure out of that you may have some questions. If you want to send me questions, please feel free to do so. I'll upload this video to YouTube and also to LinkedIn. But here's some contact details. So if you want to contact me at the Graduate School of Business, QUT, so you can see there's the address, there's my email, LinkedIn profile there. Also the Sacred Path School. So Sacred Path School is a school of existential philosophy that I've founded, which is, as I said, very much focused on providing some tools and ways of thinking about this sort of stuff differently. So you can see the email there, thesacredpathschool@acping.net. Also, there's a LinkedIn page, Facebook page, and of course, a YouTube channel. All right, so I hope all of that has been useful for you. I'll finish by dinging the Tibetan prayer singing bowl, sorry. Okay. Please feel free to contact me if you feel like you want to do some online courses at Thinkific. Also work with a limited number of people on coaching and also Vision Quest programs. That's about it for me. Hope you found that useful. Bye for now. Thank you. Thanks for watching.